Awesome. Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome.
All right, so yeah, my name is Joel. I work with Osmo here in Ontario. Now everybody's here to learn a little bit more about Osmo. Who are we? What are these finishes? You know, in some cases we have a lot of customers that have been using our finishes around these days. We have people that are just learning about hard wax oils, maybe transitioning from more penetrating oil style finishes, any of that sort of thing. So, you know, we're just more or less going around teaching everyone who are Osmo, what are hard wax oils, because they have been around the European market for a long time, but they're still fairly new to Canada, right? So in a market where we are dominated by polyurethanes and lacquers and have been for a very long time, it's always refreshing to you know, put some new finishes on a piece of wood, learn how they work, and you know, the benefits of why you might choose a hard wax oil. So in the beginning, we always like to talk about who Osmo is as a company. So Osmo is a very old, very German brand. So the company is 147 years old, and in Europe, Osmo, first and foremost, they are wood merchants. So, you know, for that 150 years roundabout, you can go in, you can buy Osmo flooring, you can buy Osmo decking, cladding, anything that you can think of are wood products that Osmo make and sell direct to market in Europe. Now, as a Finnish company, that was born out of more or less their wood manufacturing and their wood supply. Because over the years, you know, they're supplying raw unfinished wood and going, well, we should probably have pre-finished options, right? You know, if we're going to sell all of these products, I want to be able to sell pre-finished flooring, all of the above, direct to market, and, you know, more or less be able to offer that to their clients, to their customers. So Osmo at that point decided that they needed to invent a wood finish. Now, as with anything, when you're developing what you want to use in production, when you're selling, you know, mass amounts, which they do in the European market, Osmo does around about 200 million euros of business a year. So while we might look a little smaller in Canada, we've only been here around about 8 years, Eddie, before you just slap something on it and sell it and call it a day. So at that point, Osmo started to look at existing finishes, and they can kind of be broken down into two different categories. So we can have penetrating finishes, and then we can have film finishes. So can somebody give me some examples of a penetrating finish?
Oil-based.
Water-based stains.
Okay, so they're going to be more our top coats than our stains in particular. So like when we think about, you know, films, they're going to be our films are going to be like our polyurethanes and our lacquers, and then our penetrating finishes, they're going to be a lot of
oil,
natural oils in almost all cases, right? Where
oil.
Yep. So yeah, you're leaning on your, like, more or less a basic penetrating oil in terms of like treating a piece. So, you know, we've got your linseed oil, which is the foundation of most of what's on the market. We've got, you know, your tongue Danish. Some people use mineral oil. So there's a lot of different oils that are on the market in terms of wood finishing. And then in our films, we have our polyurethanes, our lacquers, and, you know, our plasticky style finishes that encase the wood, right? So between those two groups of finishes, when we look at the penetrating finishes, they look and they feel really natural, right? They saturate the wood, so they do a good job at protecting the wood from the inside out, which Osmo saw as, you know, a huge benefit. We want to protect the wood from inside out. If we saturate it, you know, moisture has a hard time getting into it. If it gets damaged, it's still saturated with oil for the most part, right? So it has that strength to it, but it also has the weakness of there is no actual build on the surface. So there's nothing to these finishes. So if you scratch that piece of wood, you're interacting with the wood directly, right? Whereas if we look at our, you know, our film forming finishes, like our polyurethanes and our lacquers on the other hand, those, you know, you're encasing your wood in plastic. You have saran wrapped that piece of wood. There's nothing getting to it, right? You've got a solid layer over top, which in terms of moisture resistance is great because it's a solid film. In terms of mar resistance, it's also great because, again, it's a solid film. If you can't get to the wood, it's hard to damage it, right? So films are good in that sense, but then what happens once they're damaged, once they start to wear? Who here has sanded off a very old film finish off of maybe a piece of furniture or some flooring? Yeah, maybe a project that you completed in the past that you had to come back and treat again. And we all love sanding the same piece of wood more than once. We're all in this for the sanding, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, films are great in the sense of when they're first coated, they're highly durable. They're really good. But once they start to wear and moisture can get under them, it'll push it off the surface, it'll peel, it'll flake, and it just looks atrocious, right? There's nothing that you can really do to repair that except for sand it off, start again. So at this point, this is when Osmo more or less wanted to find something that straddled that line between, the benefits of a penetrating finish and the benefits of a film finish. So at that point is when they've invented the hard wax oil. So what a hard wax oil is a very high solids wood oil, where in our case, we take soybean, sunflower, and thistle oil, because they're all very clear, proper drying oils. And we add carnauba and candelia wax. So carnauba wax has been a standard hard wax for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And we add the candelia to it so that it's less brittle, it's more pliable. So in the case of a hard wax oil, we're a very high solids wood oil comprised of those ingredients. And then more or less we've avoided, even in the selection of our oils, we avoided in PolyxOil choosing linseed oil, for example, because it's very dark, it's very yellow, takes a long time to dry. We avoided mineral oil because that is an oil which literally never dries. So if you coat a surface, it will just slowly leach back out of that surface over time, right? So in Osmo's products, they formulated on these oils because they're proper drying oils. And what they've created is something that actually cross-links, that actually forms almost more like a bio-resin with the wood. So what we can give you is something that, the ingredients are all traditional, very sustainable, organic oils and waxes, right? But at the end of the day, we can give you a finish that you can brush it, you can roll it, you can build various sheens, and, it's more or less a re-engineering of the wood oil. So I'll show you a couple samples, because when we think about, oils as finishes, we think about something very minimal, right? There's almost nothing to it. Whereas if you have a look at these samples and you can pass them around, you can see that there's something substantial there, right? We can build on the surface. I pass around the gloss piece because you can see that there is a very significant amount of product on the surface, and then the other is our PolyxOil raw finish. So you can see that we can go from anything from a complete minimal finish all the way up to, oh my god, it's like I just came out of the 80s. So more or less with our finishes, we've given you something that it really does build, and your ingredients are still all plant-based oils and waxes. So we retain, food safety, safe for humans, plants, and animals. And the coolest thing is that we retain the repairability of an oil. So much like an oil, once it starts to wear, you give it a wash and you do another coat. But at the same time, we can give you way more protection than you would get out of a standard penetrating oil. Where, most penetrating oils, they're going to fail to moisture, 4 hours, 6 hours, somewhere in that range. We can give you something that will, go north of, we'll get up to 24-hour moisture resistance in a piece of wood, in the case of PolyxOil. So it's something that, in terms of Canada, it's a very new mentality. It's a different way to look at wood finishes, right? We're treating with something and we're getting all of the benefits of an oil in the sense that it's renewable, repairable, sustainable, but then we're also getting the increased durability that we want out of a lacquer or a varnish. So that is kind of like the basis of all Osmo products, and then over the years, just being who they are, they've expanded into absolutely everything. So we can offer you, if it's a piece of wood, I've got a finish for it, and it's pretty specified to whatever your project is. As I said, we're a very German company, so we don't have one product, we have the perfect product for every application that you could possibly want, right? So we have full interior catalogs, where you're welcome to take some catalogs at the end of this. More or less full interior catalogs where we have clear finishes, we have full colored ranges, we have products that, function more as a basic penetrating oil when you apply them. We have, full lines of care and maintenance products, and then we also have an entire exterior catalog as well. So if you're doing your deck, your fence, structures, all that good stuff, it's all finishes that Osmo, they formulated these for specific purposes, and in Europe they sell these materials coated with these products. So it positions us as a really unique company in the sense that, we're not just selling the finish and running away very fast, right? In Europe, you buy these materials with a warranty. So at the end of the day, when we make a finish, we know that we make it to last. We know that we make it to work properly, right? Now, in terms of actually applying the finishes, because that's why everybody is actually here, right? You're going, how do I use this? What do I use it for? How do I apply it, right? We have a pretty broad spectrum of products and applicators. So we're going to start out and we're going to apply, more or less, we can break our clears into a few different types of products. So we're going to apply a little bit of each clear product, just so you can see the different ways that they function and how they work. And then we can talk about stains. So, more or less like best practices in staining, if you will, if anybody is maybe shell-shocked on some experiences with some poor stains over the years and swears they'll never color a piece of wood again. I have run into a few over the years. So what we're going to do is we're going to start kind of from, where Osmo started. The first product that they ever invented is called Wood Wax Finish Extra Thin. So that's this one here. We're going to do a giveaway, and more or less at the end, you have the chance to win a can of the 1101, the extra thin product, as well as our top oil. So Osmo's first finish that they ever invented was the Wood Wax Finish Extra Thin. So this is kind of, they're just starting to invent hard wax oils. It's a high solids wood oil, but not as high solids as we've developed in our more recent technology. Now where 1101 comes in and, really shines is when we're coating dense and oily exotic woods. It's what we're really, it's catered down to that. It is a standalone finish on anything, but it's one of our products that it does apply more as you would apply a regular penetrating oil. Thank you. So, projects here, do a lot of people here work with exotics? Exotic species in particular? Yeah. And what kind of projects do you do?
Wood turning.
Turnings? Turnings, like inlays and stuff like that, and boxes, and yeah, not huge, massive things, since the exotics are a little pricey, absolutely.
Well.
But yeah, no, the exotic species, when we talk about the 1101, it's meant for those dense and oily exotic woods, because when we think about them and we compare them to like a piece of oak, for example, you can see into the grain on a piece of oak. It's very open, right? And the exotics, you get down to things that are so dense that, they'll literally sink in water, right? So we know that when we look at these solids, we have to treat them a little bit differently. If we take our highest solid PolyxOil or our top oil straight to these, then it's a lot of wax. It's a lot of oil for that surface to try and soak up. So we recommend that you use the thin version with these species. And this is a product, it's one in our range that it applies just like you would a basic penetrating oil. You can apply 2-3 coats of it, and it will build slightly, though it is a very minimal build on this product. So just like your penetrating oils, you'll apply it in excess. So you'll just put it down heavy, and then you'll wait around about half an hour and come back and wipe away all the excess that's there. Yep.
Do you heat the oil up at all? Have an advantage?
No. So the oil is designed to work, at room temperature. It'll even work a little bit cooler for the most part. I believe anything above, I want to say it's above 10 degrees for interior products. Definitely for exterior products. But at the end of the day, Osmo's formulated so that it goes kind of just far enough into the wood. It's not trying to, saturate the whole thing like a sponge, right? So our products are designed so that, when you coat the piece, they'll go in, around about a 32nd to a 16th of an inch at most, and then they dry and they harden. And then from there, when you come back and do subsequent coats, those are to build on the surface. So this product here, I'm just going to apply really heavy, really generously. I'm going to let it soak in, and then I'm going to come back after we chat a little bit more, and I'll come back and wipe away the excess there.
So there is no catalyst or hardener to put in with this product?
So this particular product in our range, we don't add a hardener. It's designed to work just as it does. And in Osmo's standard formulations, like more or less we have the wood wax finish extra thin, which is kind of like it's bridging the gap between penetrating oil and hard wax oil. And then we have our PolyxOil, which is the really high solids version that we've passed around. And if you feel the surface, like the board that I had passed around before, it is quite hard. Like just on its own, more or less, like it cross-links with itself, it properly dries. So it is a very hard surface. It's around about, maybe 80% the hardness of a varnish, right? So we don't really need to add a hardener in order to make the surface hard. We do have our 2K product, which we'll talk about next, which we are going to add a hardener to. So more or less we need to leave this so we can move on to our 2K, and we can chat about that for a bit. And then we'll come back and we'll wipe this one back. So extra thin, that is this guy here. Then our 2K wood oil, this is a new product that we've released this year. It's been around in Germany for around about 10 years, but more or less like us as a distribution partner, we've just decided to bring it in now. So this is your product where you will be adding a catalyst. So the 2K wood oil is a zero VOC wood oil. So in the sense that it's a zero VOC product, so works well in the sense of sustainability and not using solvent in a product, which, is very much what a lot of companies are doing these days. And you're going to add your hardener. So in our 2K wood oil, these products, Monocoat products in general that you're going to see, these products are more based on linseed oil. So you need that hardener in order to actually dry the linseed oil. Otherwise it'll take, like 5-6 days to dry kind of thing, right? So a big part of that is we're adding the hardener for a couple of reasons. We're adding it so that it dries, and also just adding hardness to the wood fiber. So on our scale where we've got like 1101 is kind of your more basic bridging the gap of penetrating oils. It'll still build faster than a basic penetrating oil. Then we've got our 2K, which is going to be, it's a higher wax content than the 1101, but it's still, more akin to a penetrating oil with a hardener, right? So with our 2K, we use about half of the amount of hardener that most companies use in their 2-component products. More or less as Germany looked at this in market study, and we sent it to the chemists, the PhDs in the lab, they try absolutely everything. And they've more or less said that any more hardener than that doesn't actually improve the durability any. So they've decided to, take half of that out because the hardeners are the only thing in that product that is not great for you. In high concentrations, they technically have exposure limits, though everything that we sell is below exposure. So officially, you don't need a respirator or anything like that. But if we can take out half of the thing that's not great for you, why not? Now, the other thing is with the hardeners is you can be sensitized to them. So you might use it for a while. You can, we'll see people using them on Instagram and on YouTube without gloves. Though you should never handle anything with a hardener without them because your skin can become sensitized to it. I see some nodding in the back there. But yeah, you can become sensitized to it in the sense that, your skin can break out from repeated exposure. So I'm gonna add the hardener now. And this is going to stay, we're gonna stir this in and then we're gonna wait around about 10-15 minutes in order to actually work it into the surface. Now, the hardener that we add is an 8-to-1 ratio. So that means 8 milliliters of product to 1 milliliter of hardener. So I've got about 16 there, so I'm going to do 2 milliliters of the hardener. And then we'll give it a good stir, and we'll let it sit for a few minutes, and then we'll go and take it and apply it to some wood.
Any working time?
So pot life, once you mix a hardener in, more or less everything in that cup, it will go solid. So your pot life is a few hours. It's going to depend more on the container than anything. So like if you've got a big mass of it in a container, that's going to last longer than if I pour this out and it spreads flat, right? That's going to go hard faster. But you have a few hours to work the product and get it out onto a surface. So if you need to frantically plan a second project, you can do that. Or find a couple other things to sand up and finish. So the 2K, when we think about this product, as I said, it's more akin to, you know, a penetrating oil with a hardener added to it. It's still got a reasonable wax content, so you do get quite decent durability out of it. So these products, you know, you're going to get round about, you know, 6 to 12 hour moisture resistance. They're very minimal in their look and in their feel, which a lot of people really like for the sake of, you know, it's a very natural piece of wood, right? And you get the added bonus of you get to do it all in one coat. Mm-hmm. So if anybody, you know, if that is really your priority and you really want to get it done in one coat, you do have that option. Now, what I'd like you to have a look at is on the back of this board, this is 2K wood oil. So this is our Monocoat system with the hardener. And I think I might walk this one around. So this is a Monocoat with a hardener. Mm-hmm. And you see it's very minimal, very natural. You know, it feels like a piece of wood, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the other side, you can see our PolyxOil. So as far, you know, it's still a natural look, a natural feel. Feel the surface of it as well. You can build it very smooth. It is a product that, you know, one versus the other, we've got a almost zero build product versus something that you do get to build quite substantially, right? So this is the question that we always get is, you know, what's the difference between you and the competing brands here? What is the difference between, you know, your PolyxOil and the two component products, the Monocoats, right?
Do you sand this at all?
So both of these, like more or less, this side of the board is sanded to 150 grit, and then this side is sanded to 120 grit with a belt sander.
Really?
Oh.
So that's one of the big things that, like, when you're looking at doing projects, if you have build in a piece of wood, you can use it to start to hide sanding to a degree, right? So you can finish a piece of wood at 120 and make it look and feel really smooth, right? The build helps you with that.
Can you go, can you sand at a higher grit? Does it make a difference? Or is it, do you need the tooth or whatever to, is it suggested you only go to 150 or whatever?
Can the wood be smooth or rough? Yeah. Does it matter?
So there is a range with anything.
That's probably 120.
And then if you want to pass that through the back row, we can do that. So when it comes to sanding, I more want you to think about it in terms of application of, like, what am I doing with this piece of wood than just like nailing down one grit in particular. So when we talk about like exterior finishes, we're usually sanding 80 to 100 grit. You keep the wood really open, right? You want a lot of porosity so you can get as much of the finish to soak in as possible. When we move into interior, when we're working on like millwork, like trimming doors or floors or stairs, that sort of thing, we're going to be sanding in the 120 max 150. Usually you want to stick to 120 for that style, where, you know, in the case of like your floor, for example, you don't want to be slipping all over your floor. You don't want it as smooth as your tabletop. Same with your stairs. I don't want you to fall down your stairs. So when we look at, you know, interior millwork and, you know, building components, that sort of thing, you're typically around the 120 mark. And then when we go into furniture, our range is 150 to 220. So 150 to 220 is where you should be with pretty much any furniture type product that you're making. Yep.
No, I was just going to ask, you mentioned stairs and floors. A
Yep.
lot of guys with conventional stain will do 80 grit or do saturate, you know, oil stains, whatever, Duracell, stuff like that for saturation purposes.
When they're adding color, or
Yeah, when they're adding color.
yeah, which in a lot of cases, like
Because then you're going to do a buff after. Coat, buff. Again. Are you
So typically on stairs we'll go up to 120, and our stains do a really good job at pigment saturation.
Yeah.
So our more or less the colors that we use, like they're all mineral oxides or pigments, and they're refined down to a really small particulate size. So at the end of the day, I can sand a piece of wood to 150 grit, and I can do that with it.
Yeah, so you can still get the force of your,
Yep. Whereas, you know, if you're sanding really rough, like absurdly rough, and you're water popping and all of that kind of thing, it's kind of just, you know, making up for a product that's not doing what it's supposed to do, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Sorry, did you mention whether or not that is food safe?
Yeah, so in our range, basically everything is food safe in our interior catalog, but we've done the accreditations with our top oil and our wood wax finish in the colors. So those products are accredited for direct contact with food once dry, whereas everything's formulated on the same ingredients. So in a lot of cases you can use other products, but those are the ones that, you know, we have children's toy manufacturers and, you know, companies making, you know, masses of charcuterie boards, those types of things, and they're using those options because they have the paperwork to back it, right?
Gotcha. But the 2K wouldn't have that.
I believe it's accredited in the UK, but yeah, we've not done it here.
Is there plans to at all? Just it looks durable and great utilization for toys per se and stuff.
Yeah, possibly in the future. It is a possibility for sure. Yeah. Yep.
For repairing like a tabletop that had polyx, it's pretty easy to do a repair on it. It's just the problem with the 2K as easy to redo.
Yep. Yeah, so both products are, you know, kind of repaired in the same manner of, you know, you're like sanding out your blemish, you're touching it up and, you know, feathering it into everything around it. In the sense of, yeah, like the 2K would be as easy to repair, for sure. Yep.
what product are you guys using for charcuterie boards?
So for charcuterie boards, we're almost always using either our top oil or our chopping board oil. More or less, we get the question often, what's the difference in the product? So the chopping board oil is a tiny bit thinner and it is a more matte sheen, so it doesn't build quite as much on the surface, just because a lot of people like their charcuterie boards to look really, really matte and really natural, right? So there's not a lot to it there. And then the other thing is more or less just for the sake of retail sales, right? We want to be the thing that screams on the shelf, it's food safe, if we're amongst a mass of things that are food safe.
Because generally, when you dunk with mineral oil, right, it takes quite a while for it to finally totally not be, you know, saturated and still coming out. Right? So with this product, after, you know, when can I basically put it in the oil and then wrap it up and give it to somebody? What's your time period there?
So all of our products, they're not designed to have to like sit saturated. Like, you know, the 1101, you've got your half hour that like you'll sit with the product heavy. The 2Ks round about the same. And then the remainder of our line, our top oil, our PolyxOil, and like all of our colored products, they're all designed so that once you apply them, they do what they're supposed to do, right? So you're not really like waiting any period of time, you're just applying them as they're intended and then you're walking away. So we'll jump back into applying some product, and then when we get to the PolyxOil, you'll really see that difference for sure. Yeah, you can just pop that down there. Thank you. So our 2K's been stirred for a little bit, so we're going to grab it and we're going to start applying it. Now, you've got a couple different ways that you can apply it to the surface. You can use our roller, you can use, there's little plastic card scrapers, and if you want to get into doing big surfaces, we even have, more or less, Osmo has any tool that you can imagine. We even have professional floor trowels and buffers and deck cleaning machines. So we're really a full service company in that sense. So you can roll the product out, you can spread it with a trowel, anything that you want to get it on the surface, as long as you're getting that surface wet and saturated. So I'm going to put a little bit down on the surface, and then I'm going to spread it with my massive trowel and try not to make it look too ridiculous with the tiny piece of wood.
You don't have a credit card you can use?
Yeah, I don't have any spares right now. I wrecked them all.
Last time's came off.
But yeah, this stuff is just super simple to apply, as all of our finishes are really. when we think about, you know, kind of your traditional like polyurethanes and that style of thing, the whole keep a wet edge, all that sort of stuff, you know, this stuff is really just easy to use in that sense, right?
Can you tilt it down a little bit, just so we can see? There you go. Yep.
Can it be spray finished?
Sorry?
Can you spray it on?
So 2K, you could spray the initial amount on because you're just putting it on heavy.
Yeah.
And then again, after about half an hour, you're going to come back and you're going to buff any of the excess that's there into the wood and take off any remaining finish. So.
And really clean your gun out.
Yeah. Actually, that is a good point. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't spray the 2K. Because...
Can you use like a Scotch-Brite pad to put that on?
So in the beginning, again, we want to leave it really heavy. So we're not going to use a Scotch-Brite to put it on. You technically could. It doesn't really matter how you get it out onto the surface. And then you're going to leave it for a while to do its thing and penetrate, and then come back and wipe it back. So we, more or less, we have a couple things that need to wait for time. Now we're probably... you know, getting to a reasonable period of time with our 1101 sample, that first one that we did. So I'll take that product and I'll wipe it back now. So we can see that, you know, there's sections that have gone a little dry where you can see it's all soaked in, but we've still got some extra on the surface. So we're ready to actually take that and remove the excess, and then that's how you'll leave the piece finished, right? So you'll leave that to dry and you can come back and do subsequent coats.
Will it basically reach a maximum saturation point?
So it will. It builds very slightly, but there is a limit to that, right? Yeah. So, you know, you'll get a bit of sheen out of it. Like if you do a few coats and like you really buff the last coat, you will get some sheen out of it. And even now, like if you just run your finger along it, you can feel it leaves the wood super smooth. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
The penetration depth on this is what, like 60%?
Yeah, most of our products, they go in about that far. They're not designed to go in... Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they do make it a fair ways into the wood, but not too far. Whereas, you know, we've seen some stains over the years where like you're pulling stair treads out if you ever want to change the color, right?
When you say subsequent coats, can you kind of put a number on certain items? Like 2 coats, 3 coats?
Yeah, like you could do a few coats with this and that's totally fine. Usually like you wouldn't go past 3. You're not, it's diminishing returns with this style of product, right? You're not getting much more out of it as you move on. So you can do a few coats, but at the end of the day, like any more than that and you're not really getting any benefit to it, right? So yeah, we'll wipe that off, we'll leave it to dry.
So with that coat there, what sort of water protection sort of does that offer? Is it sort of the 3 to 5 hour type thing, or?
Yeah, so that one, if you do a few coats of it, you know, you're probably in like 6 to 8 hour mark, so it's not huge. Keep knocking over my little cup here. So yeah, it's not a huge, like it's not as much protection as we can do in a product. Okay. In terms of our clear products, that's going to be kind of the lowest on the totem pole because it isn't as high solid as, you know, the other stuff that we offer. So that's going to be the more minimal, you know, if you're doing just like easy furniture that you want to wipe on product, if you are working with those exotics, they're not as prone to that kind of damage anyways, just given that they're so dense and oily. And then at the top of that totem pole is going to be our PolyxOil, which we'll open that now and we'll start doing some application while we're waiting for our 2K. And you can kind of see just in our range why it's our flagship product. So that product in particular is the one that more or less like Osmo does the most sales with. They, you know, it's used very widely on a lot of different things, right? So PolyxOil, this is by all means, again, our flagship product. This is a product that we do add a little bit of solvent to, though Osmo uses a very high purity mineral spirit as their solvent. So it makes it a much lower odor version of an oil. And even we go a step further in that we use a mineral spirit that is mostly used on the European market for like cleaning pharmaceutical lines. So it just needs to be really clean, really pure, all of the benzene's removed, which is a carcinogen. So we just want to make sure that the solvent that we're giving you is, you know, more or less like the healthiest thing that you can possibly have in a solvent. Now, what that gives you is a product that can be applied in a lot of different ways. So this product, you can wipe it on for more minimal treatment. You can brush it, you can roll it, you can buff it. More or less, you can do anything with this product, and it will all give you kind of different results. So we're going to apply to a bunch of boards with this product just so that you can see kind of all the different variations of what we can do with it. So when we go through and we apply, you know, people have been rubbing oil into wood for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? So it's one of those things where it's not broken, we're not going to fix it. With all of our products, you have about a full 20-minute open time to do anything that you want to that piece of wood. So that's write your name on it, go grab a coffee, come back, you know, finish your project from there, right? Which is really nice in the sense that how many people here do this as a hobby? And how many do it for a living? Okay. So if you're doing this for a hobby, you want your hobby to be relaxing, right? Yeah?
Yes.
What's the most stressful part of your woodworking projects?
Paying for it?
Okay, well, there's that.
Sneaking the tools in the shop?
Yep. A couple that I haven't considered, all right. But at the end of the day, like finishing, you know, for a lot of years, finishing has been a point of anxiety for a lot of people, right? You know, you worked so hard on it, you spent all that time sanding, which we all love to do, and then you got to put a finish on it. And if the finish doesn't look good, the project doesn't look good. At the end of the day, this is what you see, right? You know, so in that case, we want the product to be extremely easy for you to work with. So we don't want you to have to fight with it. So, you know, in the case of job sites and that sort of thing, you got to keep in mind PolyxOil was designed for hardwood floors. So there are airports in Europe that are coated with PolyxOil that see 38 million passengers a year. And the reason that they chose that is it's dead simple to apply and it's dead simple to maintain, to the point where they don't even have to close the airport to do maintenance cycles. They just rope off a section, they give it a wash, they re-oil it, and they move on to the next section. So these products, you know, they're designed to be very easy to use, really forgiving in where you have to use them. So, you know, at the end of the day, if you get it dusty, if you get it dirty, it's one of those things in that 20-minute open time, you can come back and you can fix it. So, more or less like something falling in your piece. You know, if you spray a lacquer on something and you watch that hair just slowly fall, you're not doing anything about that. You know it's there for good, unless you want to do it again, right? Whereas with us, you can do very light sands in between coats to remove any debris or, you know, any dust that might be in the piece, any little nibs that might be there, and it's quite easy to do. So the first applicator, the first way to apply Osmo is wipe it on with a cloth. So it looks really good, it feels really smooth, and it's a very minimal way to treat a piece of wood. So anything lower wear, you know, you can just wipe in a couple coats and call it a day. But when we think about our products, they are a product that, as I said, builds with the PolyxOil. So in order to build the product, we're going to more or less like lean on different applicators in order to do that, which I have set one down there. So we've got our cloth, which applies very minimal amount. Then next step up is we have these white applicator pads. So I'm sure everyone's probably seen these around, right? So these are kind of like a cloth in the sense that they apply quite little, but the difference is that they give the finish back to the wood. Whereas your cloth is going to act almost more like a paper towel, it's going to steal it, right? So you pay good money for your finishes. If you want to pour it all into a cloth, I sell more finish. But at the end of the day, you can get much more out of a can using other applicators. And these white pads are a good way to have a very minimal coat still, but, you know, get your finish back out. So you can see I barely dip that, and it's enough to coat a lot. Now, the key with us is always to apply very thinly. So when we say thinly, what we mean is that we don't want to see marks. So we don't want to see like big swirl marks anywhere or brush strokes or anything like that. So if you've ever seen the words remove excess with Osmo, we mean remove excess for that given applicator. So every applicator is designed to do something different. So what you'll see is on this side, I've left some additional product. So that's too much. If you can see that swirl, there's too much there. Whereas this side, you can see, you know, we've taken that down to where it should be. And I will grab it on the way by, but if we compare this to the one that we did with the cloth, there is actually slightly more on it. So to show that, if I run my finger on the one with the cloth, it does nothing, right? You can't see any change. Whereas if I run my finger on this one, you can see where my finger's gone. There's, you know, substantially more product there, even though it doesn't really look like it. So yeah, you can kind of see the difference, and then you can see where we've just left excess product on the inside, right?
I've used a brush to put it on, and it goes on pretty good.
Yep. Yep, so it is designed, like it's designed to be brushed and rolled. It's meant, first and foremost, it was designed for flooring guys. So they need to be able to go into a home, roll a room, and back their way out of it, right? If you forget something in the corner, unfortunately walk back across it and back roll your way back out again. So it's designed for the sake of being easy to use, to be really workable, right?
So you're not using a T-bar with that?
No, so a T-bar is going to apply a lot of product all at once, which is like way too much for ours. So yeah, it'll apply probably round about double what you're supposed to in a given coat.
You'd actually roll it.
Yep. Yeah, which we'll pull out a roller in just a minute, and we'll.
Like a low fluff roller, like just...
Yeah, so they're a 4mm nap roller when we use the roller. So yeah, when we think about the applicators, the cloth's going to be most minimal. Then it's going to be the non-abrasive pad. After that is going to be these applicator fleece, which are also really good for color. So when we talk about staining, we'll take that out. And then past that, we have a brush, and then your roller. So next step, we will do a brush, just so you can see the difference there.
Would the foam brushes apply too much?
So foam will apply too much, and the other thing is, eventually the solvent in the product will eat the foam. It might not do it right away, but if you're finishing a big surface, you're going to find little tiny black specks all over the place by the end of it. So we don't recommend using foam. And again, like it does apply too much of the Osmo product. So at the end of the day, we have our range of applicators designed specifically to work with the product. So we can hand you kind of the perfect thing to use with it. Now you'll notice I'm brushing my piece of cardboard back here. So given the coverage on the product, it goes forever. So when I'm finishing a tiny piece of wood like this, it is very easy to get too much on the surface. So if you ever have too much on the surface or in your applicator, you can get it out on a piece of cardboard or a scrap of wood that's reasonably clean, that sort of thing. And then come back and back brush or back roll your surface. And you'll always know, like when you've got the right amount, you can brush over it, you won't see big brush strokes, and you'll watch it level back in with everything around it. So it's really good in the sense that it will show you when you have the right amount on it. So if that catches the light for you, you can see that I back brush over that, and it all levels back into itself, right? And then you can't really see where my brush just passed through.
Is there any type of brush, like natural hair versus synthetic versus, like, I have a friend who's a painter and he has like about 7 different types of brushes.
So we do recommend like a natural bristle, or we have, they sell them here as well. We have these Mako Elite brushes, which they're synthetic blends, but they are catered specifically to finishes like this. So the Osmo branded brushes are really good for it. The Mako Elite brushes are also very good and designed really just to work with the product. So when you're finishing your projects, if you're brushing, that's really what you want to look for, is when I pass that brush over, does it all even back out, right? Is it all just blending back into the surface?
You wouldn't buff it out with the cloth? After...
So the rule is that the last applicator that touched the surface is the thing that you applied with. So if I roll it and then I buff it, I buffed it. So it depends on what we're trying to do at the end of the day. So if we're trying to build it like a tank and make it really robust, you're going to be reaching for your brush and your roller for that, because they're going to give you a really strong, like, you know, really durable treatment. The full Osmo treatment is 2 coats with a roller. So that'll get you up to your, 24-hour moisture protection. Now, you can always mix and match. So, like, you can coat 1 coat with a roller, let it dry, and then come back and coat another coat with a buffing pad, that sort of thing, right? You always want to start with the most intense applicator, the one that's going to add more first, just to seal the wood and get it protected. And then you can move on to the buffing pads or a cloth for like finishing coats, just for like fine detail, make it smooth, make it nice to touch, that sort of thing. So for that, as an example, one of the things with the roller, you will notice that it leaves a little bit of texture on the surface. It doesn't look like, a really good finished surface after 1 coat. So in terms of furniture, you can give it a light sand at like 320 or 400 grit. And you're just doing it lightly just so that texture goes away. That's all you really want. And then if you feel this side versus this side, where I've sanded and I'm not sanded, quite a bit different, right? So, if you are treating a piece of furniture and you want it dead smooth, then you can just give it a light sand in between coats, where it'll cut just like a lacquer will. It'll even make white dust, that sort of thing, right? And that, yeah, so we don't really want you throwing it on a machine because people tend to get a little excited.
Yeah, I've used just even printer paper just to cut it.
Yeah, the old cabinet maker's trick.
Yeah, printer paper just takes a little, just smooths it out.
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, the texture is so minimal that like a piece of printer paper is enough. You can go up to like your 320 grit if you need something a little more substantial. 400 you can still do. Anything north of 400, that's for the cars. So if anybody ever tells you to take a piece of 800 grit or 1200 grit to a piece of wood, run away very fast. You guys want to feel that? So yeah, if you just need to, if you want to build something really robust, but you just need to knock a bit of texture off, you can absolutely do that. So this has 1 coat on it, so I'll just give it a light denib all over the place, wipe away the dust, and then we'll come back and we'll roll a 2nd coat on that. So with the rollers, we do recommend, again, our rollers, because they are a very small nap. So our rollers are a 4mm microfiber, which, most paint stores that you'll go to, at absolute smallest, you're going to find something that's a 5mm nap, right? So they're quite tight. They don't apply a lot of product, which is, absolutely the point. With our finishes, you are applying a very minimal amount at a time.
What about cleanup?
So cleanup is with mineral spirits. So like in a pinch, any mineral spirit will do, though we also offer ours in our brush cleaner thinner. So that is the mineral spirit that's in our product. So again, it's just a much lower odor version. Have you worked with our products before?
Yeah.
Yeah, and has the odor on them?
I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been pleasant.
It's not very strong, right?
No.
Whereas when we think about like your traditional oils that you'll buy in a paint store, like you walk in and you can smell it from the front door, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So if you do want something that's low odor and that's important to you, then our mineral spirit is really good for that.
Yeah.
And it's, you leave your brushes in there for a little while, just because we have so much wax in our product and so much oil that you want to give it a bit for the mineral spirit to do its job and clean it out. So just like a dip and a shake won't work. So you'll wreck a brush pretty quick doing that. Versus, like if you leave it in for a bit and then clean it out. In my case, I go place to place and I do this all the time, right? So mine live in mineral spirits all the time. And I was just forced into throwing out my first brush, which was like not my first brush, sorry, of these since we brought them on, which was around about 6 months old. And I was using it, you know, multiple days a week, that sort of thing. And yeah, they last a long time, so. So rolling, much similar to brushing, you know, we keep it simple. Still none of the keep a wet edge, be meticulous, oh my God, I'm gonna make a lap mark. We're a product that you can apply in any direction to get started. You just want to back roll in the direction of the wood grain. Now, I've got a little bit much here, just because, as I said, the applicators hold a lot of finish. So I'm just going to get a little bit out of my roller, and then I'll come back and back roll that. And that's what we want to see. So again, if we look at it as we back roll over it, it's going to all blend back together. So the product levels extremely well. So you were asking about like doing stairs and that sort of thing as well, right?
Yep.
Have you used our product on floors or stairs?
I'm actually installing a floor right now that's pure oil.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Oldest floors in Canada.
Sorry?
Oldest floors.
Okay.
It actually says right in the box it's your product.
Yep.
And you ship the maintenance oil with it, so.
Cool.
Dry time approximately on that?
So dry time on the PolyxOil, we say 8 to 10 hours. Now that's 8 to 10 hours for a brushed or a rolled coat. When we think about the amount that's on here versus that first board that we did, where we just wiped it in, this is gonna dry much faster, right? We know that. Officially, we'll always tell you 8 to 10 hours. But at the end of the day, once you get used to using the product, you know if you wipe a coat on, it's going to take less time to dry. And then, just to give you an idea, so if you are taking this to the job site and rolling it on, so we don't want to see like a huge amount of orange peel. So, you know, that little bit's good, and we watch that level back in with itself, and then you know that you're kind of at the right amount.
Somebody doing the roofing, slight filtering.
Yeah, so it's similar, but we're applying, you know, less than half of the amount per coat. And if you do get something in it, go back and get it, and then back roll again, and you're good. Now, when we think about durability, as we said, you know, brushing and rolling, that's your build it like a tank. You're making it really strong, right? So if we look at that beside our board that we coated with a cloth, which one do you think is going to be more durable?
The one you finished there.
Yeah. So yeah, if you've ever seen anything, you know, in the great world of YouTube, as dangerous of a place as that can be, you know, everybody in their super accurate testing.
But the wipe down finish would be great inside drawer boxes and stuff like that, where you just need a little sealing coat.
Absolutely. And that's
triple coat on the tabletop, and you're good to go.
Yep, and that's exactly what we recommend, right? That's the whole point, is we try to give you a finish that it's really malleable. If you need something minimal for something like a drawer box, you can just wipe in a coat or two.
Yeah.
If you want to build it super robust like a tank, you can do that out of the same can. We're not going to tell you you have to like go and get different products for that, right?
What about a countertop?
Mm-hmm.
What about a countertop that's exposed to moisture?
Yep, so in the case of something that you want to build really robust like that, you know, if you roll 2 coats, built like a tank, but it's kind of like a floor finish if you just roll a couple coats, right? It's not that really nice luster. You still have to work the texture out of it, that sort of thing. So what a lot of people have done is they'll mix and match, as we've said. So if you roll 1 coat and then you buff in 2 coats with pad, total of 3, then you're pretty robust there. Like, you've got quite good durability. And yeah, those are the treatments that, like, you know, we see people all the time doing like higher end countertops and cutting boards and that sort of thing. And if you go to Europe, Osmo, like IKEA sells Osmo UV coated countertops as like their higher end countertop models. And again, we're flooring lines and stuff like that, right? So the products are designed to be very robust. And, you know, even in my own world, like I have a charcuterie board, giant one that I put out last weekend for a bunch of people and just purposely left it there forever. And pomegranate seeds, like beets, all that kind of stuff, didn't mark it. So, you know, a board that was out for around about 12 hours by the time we cleaned it up at the end of the night, and just wipe it off, give it a clean, and let it dry, and it's fine.
No oils, nothing?
Nope. So yeah, in the case of you know, PolyxOil, top oil, that sort of thing, out of all of our systems, that's going to give you the most robust, and like we hear it constantly, like, I want to use an oil, but I want it to be really durable, right? So the PolyxOil and top oil, those are going to give you the most robust treatment. And I use those interchangeably because in terms of durability, they're going to be about the same. They apply the same, look the same, smell the same ingredients. They're just different formulations.
So these are nice, beautiful pieces of wood you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend using on barn board?
On barn board?
I've got some barn board that I want to incorporate into my new home, and I was thinking about finishing it with Osmo, one product or another.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Would the PolyX applied with a brush maybe be the strategy?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like if you're doing barn board, is it like a wall? Or...
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're doing a whole wall, if I hand you this and I tell you, you know, get buffing, then you're gonna look at me like I have two heads, right?
Yeah, it ain't gonna happen.
So yeah, with that sort of thing, like you'll brush the product on in all likelihood, especially because barn board's really textured, right? There's a lot of texture to it, so
hard to buff off.
Yeah, and like we don't really want you to. You're gonna get your pad caught. You're gonna leave little bits of white stuff everywhere. You're gonna tear out sections of grain. So a brush, by all means, is the right product or right applicator for that job because it will get into the dips and valleys and the highs and lows and just do a good job at like evenly treating a textured piece of wood. So you'll definitely use that. Now, are you looking for a color or just a clear finish or
I think it'll pull the color out of the wood naturally, and with the red stains from the barn that have been previously applied over the years and the graying of the wood, I think it might just have some nice natural effects of its own.
Yep, so even applying a clear to that would be decent. And typically those old like barn boards, they might have a little bit of intact finish, which like they're so old and so worn down. Normally we don't have trouble with like that biting into the finish and being fine. Officially we'll always recommend raw wood, right? Just because, you know, if somebody, keep in mind like a freshly treated surface, if somebody's put polyurethane on it, they've saran wrapped their wood, how am I supposed to get to it if my finish is supposed to penetrate into it, right? So, you know, we don't particularly recommend going over top of existing finishes, though in the case of barn board, it's so worn down that there isn't a huge issue or concern. You just need to do samples. Yep.
Thank you.
Would you not want to spray paint, or spray it, finish on barn boards?
So technically, like our PolyxOil, we do have sprayable versions. You can spray it, though I always like to recommend like starting with a brush and a roller just to get used to the product because you are applying so little in comparison. Even when you're spraying it, you're really doing like more of a mist coat. You're not flooding it like crazy, right? If you apply too much of a hard wax oil, you'll just end up with like a sticky, hazy mess. And, you know, when you apply too much, it can go soft as well. So we try to keep it, you know, very minimal. It's only meant to be a little bit of product on the wood.
The barn board is very porous too.
That is true.
Mm-hmm. So it would soak up the...
To a degree, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So that kind of covers all of the different ways of actually applying PolyxOil so that you can see, you know, why it's our flagship product, how it's, you know, wildly different in terms of it'll do anything that you want it to, really, right? It'll give you that raw, unfinished look all the way up to really high build, high gloss, that sort of thing, and quite robust treatment. Now, we'll come back, you know, it's been approximately the amount of time for the 2K. So we'll come back and we'll remove the excess off of this now. So I'm just going to take the bulk of it off with a cloth, and then I'm going to come back with a buffing pad and just work that last little bit in, just since I have way, way too much on the surface there. So similar to, you know, what we talked about with PolyxOil, you really don't want to see excess on the surface with these products. So you want to make sure you get out those swirl marks, that you're not seeing a ton of that. And that when you walk away, it's just a nice, even surface. And then bringing it back kind of to what we were talking about of we have all degrees of treatment, right? So 2K is really nice because it's a one-coat system. So in a one-coat system, it'll apply and it'll build more than one coat of PolyxOil, right? Because it's not, PolyxOil is a multi-coat system. So you can see that, you know, being like the zero VOC product with that added hardener, the hardener gives you a bit of build, a bit of sheen, right? So if you want to get it all done in one coat, then the 2K will do a good job at doing that, where it will give you a bit of build, a little bit of sheen. It's still a very minimal finish, and also better protection than just, you know, rubbing in one coat of a multi-coat system. So you can kind of see, even though we only buffed in one coat, there is a fair amount there, right? All right, so that kind of takes you through, like, we have quite a variety of even just clear finishes, right? And the question that we always get is, what's the difference between all of these clear finishes? So I really wanted to take some time just to, you know, go through those systems and that sort of thing, right? So in terms of, you know, just applying like a clear finish to a project, do we have any questions at the moment?
Yeah, because even with the Polyx, you got all these different numbers, so 43.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? It's just the different sheens?
Yep, yeah, so with the PolyxOils, we have 3031, which is a matte, 3043, which is satin. So matte being around about a 5-degree sheen, satin being around about 20, and then gloss, which will go up in the like 50 to 60 super shiny range, right? So the different ranges, like the different numbers just correspond to the sheen. And then the cool thing is that if you want, you can even mix them together if you want something in between. So we're really customizable even in that respect, where, you know, if you tried the matte and you wanted a touch shinier, but you don't want it fully satin, you can add a tiny bit of the satin to it. So it'll really give you anything that you want there. The one word of wisdom I will give you is that higher sheens are very powerful. They will overpower a matte sheen by a lot. So you'll do like, you know, a tenth of the satin to, or like 10% satin to 90% matte, and you'll see the sheen come up still. So in the PolyxOils, yeah, we've got the various sheens, and then the other one that you'll notice is 3051 raw. So that is a tinted version of PolyxOil, and that is designed for the non-yellowing effect. So that is a version of PolyxOil that has just a little bit of white pigment added to it, so that when you brush it out, it just makes, you know, a light-colored species like oak or maple just look really natural and raw, right?
What number is that? Sorry?
3051. Yeah, and if you look at the back of the board, this is unfinished versus finished. So in terms of like an unfinished look, it's about as good as you're going to get, right? So yeah, that covers, you know, we do have a lot of different SKUs, so there are a few options there for you for sure.
I just wanted to ask, with the 2K, does the hardener come with, or do you purchase separately?
Yep, the hardener comes with it. So we've got 2K available in 2 different sizes. And yeah, basically each hardener comes with the product. So. In the future, you know, eventually we'll have the hardener for sale aside from that if you do want it, but more or less, like, you know, it comes with enough hardener for each can, so you don't really need it.
Is there a shelf life on there? Like once you open it?
So, yeah, on the 2K, like the oil itself is going to be around about a 5-year shelf life, same as all of our other products. On the hardeners themselves, it's a couple years, somewhere around there, give or take. And then if they're, yeah, with the hardeners, if they ever do become an issue, that's where you would just buy it separate and replace the hardener, and then your oil will still be good.
I was wondering about the sheen of the top oil compared to the matte of the what you just used. The sheen. Yep. How does the sheen compare?
So top oil, everything that Germany does is by market study. So when they formulated top oil, it's the perfect sheen for a countertop or tabletop, that sort of thing, right? That's how they make these decisions. And top oil is between a matte and a satin. So if you take matte PolyxOil, it goes matte PolyxOil, top oil, satin PolyxOil. And then due to basically popular request, we've also released top oil in a satin, which is now available tonight for pretty much the first time. Yep.
With regards to natural oils, some of that, do you guys have any protection against that, or is it comparable to kind of the standard, finish, finish or something like that?
Yeah, so when we talk about bleaching, like UV interaction with wood, it will always fade a surface over time, right? And, in a lot of cases, like the old school, like linseed oils, they get really dark and really orange.
Yeah, it's the sun.
Yep.
But like I've seen extreme examples, carpets with walnut floors and stuff like that.
Yep.
Is it gonna kind of behave similarly, or?
Yeah, so whenever we talk about a clear product, clear products don't provide UV protection.
Yeah.
So, no clear varnish, finish, anything like that will give you UV protection unless it has an active inhibitor added to the product. So in our exterior catalog, we have our UV protection oil, which has that active inhibitor added to it. But the key with those is that they're only for vertical surfaces. You need either a vertical surface or up to 15-degree pitch for water runoff. For the reason being that those inhibitors, they do a really great job at protecting against UV fade by a factor of like 12 roughly. So it extends it significantly, but where they fail is when you have standing water on them. So if you coat a tabletop with something with that inhibitor in it, it will break down the finish on the tabletop. Yep.
Earlier we were talking about best application for a countertop. I've got live edge countertop I'm doing. You talked about rolling it on the first coat and then using the applicator for 2 more coats after that to get a good hard protected finish.
Correct.
Also talked about the top oil for countertops. Do I need to rethink the earlier strategy of the three coats with the PolyX, or?
So both PolyxOil and top oil, they'll apply the same. They follow the same rules in terms of treatment.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, it's
is one more durable than another, or? I like the satin finish on the top oil. That's kind of appealing.
Yeah. So there's no difference in durability. The only key is like the shinier a surface is, the more readily it'll show scratches and wear and that sort of thing, right? But if it's too matte, then it just looks unfinished and kind of dry and hungry, is the way that it can turn out. So yeah, in that matte to satin range is where it's deemed like specifically for countertops, tabletops, just like the best wearing, the best looking, all of that sort of thing. And I'm going to take one step back. So you were asking about color retention, light fastness. So what you can do for that is instead of leaning on the clear coat for UV protection, you can add pigment. So pigment is your best friend with that. Where if you want to protect from like UV fade and that sort of thing, the pigments in a finish, they can act as like a sunscreen to the wood. So they can actually just block UV interaction. And in our case, we use all natural mineral oxides as our pigment. So they have much, much better color retention. You can think back to like ancient Rome and, the things that you go and you see natural earth pigments in, like your buildings there, right? And they still have some color hundreds and thousands of years later, right?
The oxide in the finish.
Pardon?
The oxide in the finish is assisting with that.
So like the pigments themselves, like they're all natural mineral oxides of some variety. So like your white pigment is titanium dioxide, for example, and they're all variations of that. But yeah, being natural mineral oxides, they will hold their color much, much better than just like a tint base or like, the universal colorants that a lot of companies are using and, like aniline dyes and that sort of thing as well, right? Yeah. So with that, we can jump in and we can apply a bit of color now, just since we're bridging that gap anyways. And we can talk a little bit about staining and, what should we be doing when we add color to a piece versus not adding color, that sort of thing, right? So do a lot of people here use stains? Do you color wood a fair amount?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And are you using water-based stains, oil-based stains?
Osmo, of course.
I paid him to say that. Yeah.
It's oil-based.
I think oil-based gel is what I've been using a lot lately.
Is that it?
Yep.
It seems to be forgiving to get it on and without blotching.
Yeah, so like whenever we're staining, that's kind of the key, right? Is you want it to be forgiving.
Because you want to be able to control it, yeah. Because we're not experts.
So we've all had that stain that you look at and you're like, it's not quite even, and you touch it again and then it's 2 shades darker, great. I wanted a gradient, that was my intention.
Yeah.
So Yeah, basically workability in a stain is really important, right? Because if we don't have workability, that's, you know, it's very hard to get even color on something if you don't have time to actually apply it. You know, if you have to meticulously brush it and keep it wet the whole time, and, you know, forbid you're on a job site or trying to actually do something and the homeowner asks you a question, or like, you know, there's all sorts of things that happen that are just kind of chaotic in that sense, right?
I guess you can break the question into two. If you're putting on a stain, like a colored finish onto it, I assume as you put more and more coats, it's going to darken the color.
Yeah, so our stains, there are some stains that like don't move a ton coat to coat. Our stains, you can actually build intensity by doing a couple coats. Even more than that, you can build intensity by grabbing for different applicators.
I'm just wondering, could you mix a stained with a non-stained version of your product? Like, are they sort of fundamentally the same?
Yeah, so that is a thing that like a lot of people reach for as a tool with us, is you can actually mix your stain right into your clear coat. So if you need just subtle color, you can mix just a little bit of the stain into it and brush it or roll it on. And, you know, it'll give you a little bit of color, it'll move the undertones of the wood around, that sort of thing, which is quite unique to us in like the sense that you can really like tint your top coat, or even like just the clear coat in general. Quite a useful tool for a lot of these kind of like muted natural tones that everybody's doing nowadays, right? Yeah. And then when we're talking about staining in general, you know, when you're prepping to stain, are you sanding differently typically than you would otherwise? Not so much. So whenever you're staining, you can always think about it as the rougher you sand, the more color something's going to take. The finer you sand, the less color something's going to take. So that is also going to be dependent, you know, the amount of color something will take will be dependent on species to a degree. You're never going to get a closed or diffuse porous species like maple to take color the same way that a piece of very open porous white oak will, right? So the structure of the wood itself is going to be a huge contributing factor in that. And then the other thing that will influence it is the applicator that you grab with us. So if you go on our Instagram page at some point, if you need a refresher, we do have videos on all of this stuff. And there's one video in particular where we take each applicator and we go and apply to a piece of wood with it. And you can see the difference that each one gives in the color saturation as well. So I have here just our black oil stain. So in our colored range, we have a couple of different products available. We have oil stain and we have wood wax finish. So the easiest way to remember this is the one that says stain is just a stain, higher color intensity because it's just a stain. Whereas the one that says finish is a 2-in-1 stain and finish. So on lower wear surfaces is fine totally by itself. On higher wear surfaces, you just want to add a clear top coat to it, just for that added protection. So the 2-in-1, you can think of it this way, like, you know, if it's not a tabletop or a floor or some stairs, then you're probably fine with it on its own, unless you just really like building everything with the most durability possible, right? But it's, you know, for the type of thing where like if you're doing wainscoting or trim and doors or like a T&G ceiling, that sort of thing, the wood wax finish is great for that. It's fine by itself. So with our oil stain, when we're applying it to a piece of wood, I save the stain pad for this because, or the fleece applicator, sorry, because it does a really good job at just an even color saturation. So you can see that took almost no effort. Like that was extremely easy to apply, and it leaves just a really nice, even coat of stain.
What was that? What species?
Red oak.
Yeah. That's okay for a flat piece, but if it's a piece of furniture or something,
yep,
it's not. You can't just apply it this very flat.
Yeah. So the fleece pads, they do come off of the little Velcro pad if you need it. So like if you had something like a spindle or an inside corner, you can take it off of the pad and contour it, or, you know, leave it edged around the pad. I'd even like cut a couple contour blocks at home for like getting in corners and stairs and stuff like that. So you can definitely make them work for, you know, pretty much any application, and we have a lot of furniture manufacturers that do like full dining sets with these, and they produce, you know, for full restaurants at a time kind of thing, right? So they're definitely workable in that sense. And just like our clear finishes, our stains won't cause issues if you don't get them down perfectly in the first few seconds. So you do have time to work with it on the surface where it won't cause any weird issues for you. We were at a wood show a couple weekends back, and it was really funny because we would get distracted going off talking to other people. Somebody would walk up to a wet piece of wood and just grab it. And then we'd come back and we'd be like, oh, there's handprints in it again. Guys, come on. It's like it's surrounded by open cans, it's wet. And we come back and we just finish, like basically go back over the surface again, even it out. And as long as you're in that 20-minute open time and it hasn't really started to tack up on you, then you're totally fine to fix it. You know, don't be worried about it. Don't be, you know, afraid to come back and pull that hair out or that sliver that's broken off or fallen into the piece, right?
Should be able to find the guy that touched it already with black.
Yeah, I mean, there are fingerprints sometimes. Obviously not with the gloves, but... so yeah, we keep the products extremely easy to work with in the sense that, like, you got a lot of time to figure out what you want. You can also do multiple coats of stain, so you can let that dry, and if you need more intensity, you can come back and do another coat. Am I going to tell you to roll on 2 coats of stain? You're building up a bit much there in a lot of cases, but most of the other applicators, you can come back and do a second coat. The other thing that it gives you is it allows for different looks, right? Because we're always trying to get different looks out of a piece of wood. So if you really like seeing something like grain collection, where you see it just collect in the grain, and you want like less intensity around it, you can come back and you can wipe it. If you want to see, you know, more opacity, more of like a solid surface.
Hold it up. Yeah, there you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Hey, look at me doing this backwards. You taught me something tonight. This is better.
That's quite a difference.
Yeah. But yeah, in the same can, I can give you both options, right? Like you can do a really transparent finish where you see it all in the grain. You can do a really intense finish where, you know, it almost blocks it out and looks more uniform.
How do you get that? How do you get a solid?
So when we're going more solid, you're going to be reaching, you know, you're either going to roll it, brush it, or use one of these fleece pads. So when I apply to this, for example, like I would use the fleece pad and then I would come back as I start top coating and I would add just a little bit of black into my top coat, just a very small amount so it keeps getting darker instead of getting lighter as I...
The grain's going to take more natural.
Yep.
Okay, so you're related to that.
Yeah, so like this piece, for example, this is white oak versus red, but this piece is 1 coat of black oil stain with the fleece pad, and then my top coats have just like 5% of the black oil stain mixed into the clear, and I've done a total of 3 coats.
It almost looks like exterior.
It's a solid color, right? Like it's... So we can do a lot of really cool things, and within our wood wax and our oil stain range, we have 35 colors available. So it's funny, like we were talking about toy manufacturers before. So we can make every color of the rainbow. That is a credential that you need for toy manufacturers. That they call us all the time and they're like, can you make this color? Yes, and it will be bright, it will be vibrant, right? So I believe I actually have a bit of the green here as well, which we can put down. But yeah, we can get quite intense color. You can mix, you can match, you can blend, like you can add color into the clear, all of that sort of thing as well, right? So.
How long does it take to dry?
So when we're talking about color, we like to let color set for about 12 hours, just so when you come back and you treat subsequent coats, you don't chance lifting the color. You want to let the pigment dry well, right? Where when we're talking about clear, 8 to 10 hours. In the case of 2K, 12 to 24, but you're kind of getting your time back in the sense that you just did 1 coat, right? So we have all sorts of different options in terms of like color intensity, to the point where like, you know, this green almost comes across as much as paint, but it still gives you a very If you want, you can wipe it back, have a very transparent, natural look in the wood.
Is that John Deere green?
It's Osmo green.
Osmo green. Festool Osmo green.
Yeah. It actually is the green of the Osmo tree, I believe, so. But yeah, there's like all sorts of different things that you can do with our products. They're extremely malleable. These are the kind of things that make most people cringe when they're used to working with, you know, say maybe a water-based stain. Mm-hmm. So all different things that you can do for sure. You can brush it out, and then, you know, even those like intense two-tone effects, you can get those with our products as well, where you know, like if you want to see a lot of texture and like really intense two-tone, you can wire brush a piece if it has varying grain hardness. So you can take something like ash or oak or, you know, softwood, cedar, that sort of thing, and you can wire brush it, which will tear out the soft grain, and then you can come back and coat it, and it'll give you a lot of texture in the wood, right?
So you can do double pass.
Sorry?
You can do double pass on stairs, right? Like white grain on a gray or something like that.
Yep.
Matching for it.
Yeah, and like we do a lot of that really intense cerusing.
Yeah.
You do have to keep in mind that it's harder to fix something when you've layered like color and clear, and you know, the more layers you add to something, the more that you have to do if you ever need to repair it.
Yeah, but with conventional stain, you never get that, right? It's the cerusing and everything of it in oil.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and we can even, with the cerusing, we can take it a step further where we have these rubber scrapers. And if you want to see something super transparent and really intense two-tone, you can take, you know, a squeegee or a rubber scraper like this to it, and it'll give you that really intense two-tone effect. Oh. Now, before I pull a rookie move and just pour it all over the place, I'm going to wipe up my scraper, and then I'll pull it back again.
Would you go base, like, would you go grain color first or base color first with that?
Your second color will sit in the grain.
Yeah, same thing as when they run floors.
Yep. Okay. So like, well, it depends on what you want, right? Like if I'm going really, if I'm trying to get a more opaque color down first, or like, you know, do my kind of like base color, then I'll probably like brush or roll that on, at least like maybe mixed in with the clear so it's a little more transparent. Just thinking towards like modern flooring and the way that it looks when they do cerusing.
Yeah.
So typically, you know, you'll mix in a color that's a little more transparent, you'll brush it on, then you'll come back and you'll do something like this with like a white to get the white to stay in the grain, right? So yeah, as you can see, like we can do some really intense colors where like a lot of our competitors really fail when it comes to like opacity and like, you know, getting more intense color, more of a solid finish, right? Not to say that that is the answer all the time. You don't always want a super green piece of wood. But it does give us malleability. It gives us one finish that gives you all sorts of different things you can do with it, right?
And what you've been describing has been around the stain. Is it applied to the wood wax finish as well?
Yep. So I actually switched over without really saying it. So, you know, this is the black oil stain. And then in the wood wax, we have the intensive tones, which the green is one of. So yeah, more or less you can still get, like there are intensive tones of wood wax, which just have really high pigment loads to the point where like if you pick up a can of white, you'll go, woo. And then, yeah, for your more, you know, for your blacks and your whites, if you want to go even more intense, go straight stain, and then you'll top coat after that. Okay.
So you can use this on a floor?
Yep, so either oil stain or wood wax can be used as a base coat on a floor, and then it always needs to be top coated by PolyxOil. Now we prefer on like tighter grain species like maple and that sort of thing, we prefer you to use oil stain because the wood wax finish is a little bit softer than PolyxOil, and it builds a bit more on the surface than the oil stain does, right? So on a really dense, hard grain floor, or like tight grain floor like that, we'd prefer that you stick to the oil stain product for your color. You can mix in a bit of wood wax if you need to shift the tone around, but just not like, you know, you're not going to roll a coat of wood wax finish on a floor, right? And typically, you know, you're always thinking about workflow and how you're applying things, much like the furniture question, right? So typically on a floor, you're always going to buff in your stain coat with like a white pad. Technically, if you want, you could brush out your stain with like a big floor brush, though, you know, it takes a fair bit of skill to brush that evenly over thousands of square feet, right? Yeah. So we'd rather, in that case, like with the oil stain, for example, you buff one coat of stain. If you need it darker, you could buff a second coat of stain into a floor, and then you can come back and top coat. Yeah. So more or less in terms of the products, you know, we've gone through like quite a range, a lot of different stuff so far. So I want to open it up more to like questions and answers of, you know, what are your projects and what are we looking to do here? You know, what specifically do you need to see out of Osmo? Yep.
Sorry, I don't know if I missed it. Your oil stain there, is it zero VOC?
No.
No, it's not.
No, so the only zero VOC product that we offer are the 2K products.
Okay, so your oil versus a main wax or something like that. Did you say with the oil you took out the
Benzene.
Benzene?
Yep. Yeah. Benzene is removed from our solvent before we add it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then just as a comparison, because I know the products that you're you're looking at.
Standard oils, right?
Yeah. So like, give that a smell and like tell me how that compares to your standard oils. Quite low odor in comparison. Yeah. So yeah, again, like a lot of the standard oils that like people are used to, they're the kind of knock your socks off at the front door kind of oil, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we do keep a bit of solvent in like the oil stain, the wood wax, the PolyX, all of those finishes, just so they are so malleable to work with and varying, right? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. How's everybody else doing for questions?
How do they perform on naturally oily woods like teak or cedar or?
Yep. So yeah, that's the situation where like in the very beginning we applied our extra thin finish. So when we take the extra thin versus the high solid, we make sure we have the lids on before we shake them. So you hear that, right?
Yeah. Oh.
So the solid content in this is very, very high, right? Whereas this is much thinner.
Right.
So on our dense oily woods, we want you to at minimum start with this, if not finish with the extra thin entirely. You know, it is a standalone finish, and on those species it does really well. If you, let's say, like really wanted to build a bit more sheen or like build it a bit more robust, you can do a base coat of this so that it all soaks into the grain.
This is
yeah, the 1101. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, the thin.
The extra thin.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
So you can do a base coat of the extra thin so that it all soaks into the grain and takes up that space, and then you can do a very thin coat of PolyX oil. But I'm never going to tell you to take a piece of rosewood and like roll it on really thick, right?
No.
How are we doing? Specific projects people are working on, considering us for at the moment?
No, nothing.
I was wondering where you can buy this. Maybe you addressed it at the beginning. Is it all online or like I know Lee Valley?
Here. So we have 150 retailers countrywide. So like Exotic Woods stocks almost our entire interior catalog at the moment. We'll likely be doing exterior in the future as well. So more or less like within the GTA, you've got no more than half an hour drive to get to somebody. So there's lots of places around. Yep.
First coat of extra thin, can you second coat with PolyX to build robust?
Yep.
Okay,
absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Got an online question.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in.
No, we missed that question. Remember to recap the cutting boards and whole turns?
Yep.
What's the best product?
So for cutting boards, anything that you want food safe, more or less like top oil, chopping board oil in your clears, and then wood wax finish in a color if you really want to see color.
So top oil is what you recommend?
Yep, absolutely, yep.
What's your maintenance look like
on
what's your cutting board oil? Like, you know, you're giving away something or whatever. Like, how do they care for it after?
Yep, so yeah, basically like we have a full range of maintenance products. So we have a spray cleaner that is just plant-based soaps, and it has a little bit of our natural oils. So instead of dehydrating a piece of wood, it will rehydrate it to a degree. So like your daily, weekly cleaning, all that sort of thing, that's totally fine. We just don't want to see you like pouring tons of soap on it every time you clean it, right? That sort of thing. It's not a throw it in the dishwasher special. So yeah, like that is just kind of like your clean it as often as you like kind of thing. Then a step above that is our liquid wax cleaner, which is available in a gel and a spray. The gel, basically, like, it's just the waxes. So I'm going to take a raw piece of wood here. It's just the waxes that are in the product. So if I take that and I rub that into a piece of wood, try not to get green everywhere. That will, you know, every 10 months or so they can use that. And that's just going to like take out small scratches and blemishes and just restore the moisture resistance on the piece to the point where even taking this to a raw piece of wood, if I pour water on it, it beads. So when you're talking about like, you know, upping your durability, giving it a maintenance cycle type thing, like the liquid wax cleaner will go a long way in terms of bringing back that moisture resistance and hiding those small scratches.
That was just raw.
Yep, that's just raw wood.
Before you put that in, the wax on it was raw.
Yep.
You just pour water.
Yep.
But what if you want to wash it? Clean dirt off. Clean dirt off it.
Yeah, so just like your spray cleaner, just like a damp cloth, not like tons and tons of detergent kind of thing, and that'll be fine. So, yeah, so that is kind of like the middle tier in terms of, you know, treatment, where think of it this way, like if you're doing something like a floor in a kitchen, I'm using this around my dishwasher every now and then and around my sink, right? So I'm going to treat that more often than I'm going to go treat the bedroom closet, right?
Is that available in smaller quantities?
Yeah, so there's a 500 milliliter gel, so like this kind of size, and then there's a little aerosol can as well. So there are a couple options in that, and it'll last you a long, long time. And then our final treatment would be our maintenance oil. So this is like, when you think about a piece that's been treated, it's at 100% finish, like treatment at first, and then it slowly wears down with us, right? So when you get it to around about 75%, you can use the maintenance oil to top it up to 100 again. If you like really beat it into the ground, then you'll come back and treat it again with the top oil. So, but typically, like the whole benefit of using a hard wax oil is the fact that when treated properly, it should never have to be sanded again. So at any point, like we've seen commercial restaurants where they have used and abused floors in terrible, terrible ways, and you know, not done maintenance for years on end. And I've seen floors cleaned with our intensive cleaner and re-oiled, and they look awesome. No sandpaper touched.
No buffer.
So use a floor buffer to apply the, like to more or less go over and clean the floor, and then to apply the subsequent coat. But yeah, also you don't have to think about it in the sense of like a 150-pound floor buffer if you want. You can get our little 25-pound buffer, and you know, not be stuck carrying that around.
What about refinishing a factory finish floor? So grinding it down and redoing it with your product, would that be a good candidate for that?
So
Maples comes to mind.
So there's a few factors that you want to think about when refinishing floors. If it's an engineered floor, how thick is your wear layer, right?
Solid wood.
Okay, so if it's solid wood, you got tons to work with. So more or less, if it's an oiled floor, just like in general, if it's an oiled floor, typically like our maintenance oil is fairly universal in the sense that you can use that to like top up any oiled floor. You always need to do your tests because we don't know what other companies put in their products. But if we're talking about a film, like a lacquer or a polyurethane, those need to be sanded away before you can finish with our product. And then at that point you can use it, but yeah, you can't put it directly over top of it.
Yeah, I was thinking after sanding, so if you sanded it raw, you could use your product on the whole floor, no problem.
Yep, absolutely. We do it all the time.
Nice.
You were talking about your charcuterie board and how you had product laying on it for, like food product laying on it for about 12 hours.
Yep.
What did you coat that board with?
So that was our PolyxOil raw, and it was a piece of like spalted maple. So it wasn't the hardest or densest piece of maple. It's a little more open porous. And yeah, I think it had, I don't even remember, probably 3 coats with a brush with like a cut sand in between. Just like, a board that I took around and trained people much like tonight with, and just kind of like treated over.
What was the number then for that? Is that the 5-1?
3051, so that's your non-yellowing. That's the with the little bit of white pigment, though any of the clears, any of the top oil, it'll all behave that same way.
And that's what you used for that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
It seemed,
Sorry.
It seemed to me at the beginning you were talking about the extra thin
Yep.
being really, I'm sure they're all good, but then you went into PolyX and that seemed to be a more dominant topic. I missed it if you gave it as to what's the decision point between those two? What's the factor?
So the extra thin is going to be exotic specific, so dense and oily woods, and it's going to be kind of lower on the durability totem pole. So it's not as durable. It doesn't build as much. It's, you know, you can't get as much sheen variation, and you apply it like a penetrating oil. Next up is 2K, where it's a one coat. We add our hardener. You get a little bit more sheen, a little bit more durability, but it's a one coat system, so it still has its limitations. And then PolyxOil is at the top of that for durability, where, you know, it's brushed and rolled on. It's built like a tank, like that.
So I'm making a desk with mahogany veneer plywood and solid mahogany parts as well. So would the extra thin be okay, or would PolyX then be better for that?
So I would probably use the PolyX on that.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's going to be a higher wear surface, definitely, like the desktop, I would say that you'd want the PolyX on that for sure.
So I'm building a timber frame home, and my timber framer has applied Osmo Teak, I think he called it.
The 9262.
9262, I gotta write that down. Hang on, 9262. So he's applied an initial surface. Of course, you go through the construction process. There's dirt, there's drywall dust, there's all sorts of things. I'm gonna want to clean that, and then probably do some touch-ups afterwards. If I have a teak coloration on it now, and I apply the touch-ups, am I going to be darkening the hue of those timbers?
So when you do your touch-ups, you're gonna more or less you have to approach it a little differently than when you're first coating something. So we do this all the time with timber framers as well. Like we have manufacturers that make a couple hundred structures a year that they use that one coat only product. So it's really popular for that purpose. And when you go to do your touch-ups, it depends on what the mark's from. Like if it's from a strap sliding on it, you might have burnished it, so you might have to give it a really light sand around that 80 to 100 grit mark, wherever they finished at.
Okay.
And then at that point, just take a cloth and just rub it in around that area, and don't leave excess around it. So you're not going to go and actually just brush it on the surface, because that's just going to stack with what's already there.
Right.
Whereas if you just rub it in around with like a cloth, then it's going to be much more minimal. And if you feather it out with the cloth, you don't really see it around the outside.